One of the problems with Batman as he is there's a lack of good villains. Now hold on, before you get out the pitchforks, this is from Batman and DC legend Bruce Timm. And I've gone back, recently to kind of taking a look at some other people's takes. I don't really look at other YouTubers because I feel like that just, usually leads to unnecessary drama and clout chasing and BS. But when it comes to like professionals, when it comes to people actually in the sphere of creating some of these things that we love, Bruce Timm is someone who I truly admire in terms of his art. And what I mean is his artistic capability and the pieces he has made. For example, I purchased, I believe it's called Naughty and Nice. It's some of the more adult-themed pinup pieces that Bruce Timm has created over the years. And I purchased that book a little while ago when it got reprinted because I love the style that he draws things in. He's a fantastic artist when it comes to making things show up visually, whether it be on a screen or on paper. Over the years, Bruce Timm has tried to enter more of a creative role when it comes to writing. He's wanted to be the person who tells people what to make come to life. I understand that desire, but it hasn't gone over the best. Now, I do want to say this. This is not an attack on his artistic abilities, nor is it me saying that you should not watch Batman the Caped Crusader, which is what this interview was actually about. If you love the Caped Crusader, good for you. The reason I have not talked about it much is I'm very bored of DC rebooting their animated stuff, jumping from continuity to continuity. I really haven't enjoyed any of them as much as I enjoyed the old DCAU, which I've talked about several times. I know I'm the old man who can't let it go, but that's just kind of where I'm at. There's standalone stuff I really like, but overall, I'm just not that interested in talking about Caped Crusader because I don't really have a passion for it, at least right now. But I do have a passion about the character of Batman, and I do have a passion about the characters and worlds of DC Comics and Marvel Comics and all these other ones. So we're going to take a look at the entire context of this today because I think that this statement is fundamentally false. He should know better than this. I do have a question for you for today, which is, do you have a favorite artist? Whether it be a comic book artist, maybe a Patreon artist, or even just an animation artist. I would love to hear why you like them, what you like so much about their work, because I love art, so I will definitely be checking that out when you let me know. I did also want to point out there's several ways to support this channel. Some of them I will flash through the video. Unfortunately, I will not be flashing you, but I will show you some of the ways. And some of the ways are actually things like our other channels. Like, for example, we have Magical Jill, where we talk about a lot of animation stuff because we talk about anime. We also have JayRPG, where I talk about role-playing games, Japanese role-playing games, stuff like that. And of course, as well, Degenerate Plays, which I hope some of you check out because that channel does not really grow very much, but we play through video games over there. We've actually played through some Arkham stuff over there. We will be playing through more in the future, and a lot of superhero games too. Currently, we're playing through Assassin's Creed 1 and Stellar Blade, so it's been a lot of fun. Bruce Timm and co-executive producer James Tucker were actually part of an interview answering questions about Batman Caped Crusader when it was coming out on Amazon's Prime Video service. Worth mentioning, this was originally for HBO, but then WB got really damn cheap and decided to basically scrap it and made them shop it out to another place. They were talking about this with Emmys.com, and Bruce Timm was answering questions about the entire series. And they were talking a little bit about the characters in it, and they actually talked about the villains because the interviewer said, "I clapped when I saw the Penguin was a woman," and they went on to talk about it a little bit. I want to clarify here, I don't care that the Penguin is a woman. We'll get to that in a couple minutes. But what followed this question, or I guess statement, about why they made that choice to change Penguin is what's very fascinating to me, where Bruce Timm answered and said, James Tucker and I were talking about the overview of the show, and we said, one of the problems with Batman as he is there is a lack of good villains. You've got Catwoman, you've got Poison Ivy, you've got Harley Quinn, but it would be really good to have more female villains. And off the top of my head, I said, well, we never really could figure out exactly what to do with the Penguin, what the gimmick for Penguin would be. What if we gender flipped the Penguin? Tucker then answered and said, when he, talking about Bruce Timm, said, maybe we can gender flip Penguin, I just got this flood of ideas. I was thinking of Marlene Dietrich in her tuxedo and Cabaret, the musical and the art form, and kind of went on talking about it and talking about how he knew what he wanted to make it. But in general, they then said that was the mission statement for the show in general, to do something that harkened back to the original but flip it. We've seen live action and animated versions of Batman on TV. And they were talking about basically why they made that decision to make Penguin a woman. Now, I know that this has been a point of controversy for some, especially with all the DEI stuff, inclusivity, etc. And I will absolutely concede that there have been many shows, movies, books, etc. that prioritize whatever their message is over the quality of the art. Remember when we talked about Ta-Nehisi Coates turning the Red Skull into a caricature of Jordan Peterson in Captain America comics? Because a lot of creators care more about trying to like take a dig at someone in real life, or be like, we owned Orange Man, LOL, got him, in our comic book or our movie or something like that, than they do about telling a good story. I do agree with that that is a thing that happens. I do also think that some people are way too jumpy about that. Every time they see a black character or a woman or something, they're like, oh no, it's woke, stop, please. I don't really have a big opinion on Penguin being a woman. I really frankly couldn't care less, because this is a random alternate universe of Batman. That said, something that's funny to me about it is the idea that it had to be done because Batman doesn't have good villains. And I'm going to be really charitable here, because if we were talking about just all of his villains, you're looking at Joker, Ra's al Ghul, Mr. Freeze, Penguin, obviously, as a male villain, of course. You're looking at all of these mainstays, Mad Hatter, just off top of my head. You would be the dumbest person alive to say that he has no good villains, or he doesn't have enough good villains. I'm going to be really charitable here and just assume that he's talking about female villains only, and that he misspoke, right? That's not what he said, but let's just assume he misspoke, because I'm sure I have a billion times in my own videos said something stupid where I meant to say something else. Even if this is only about female villains, it doesn't make any sense at all, and it's absolutely ridiculous. I wanted to run through some of the common villains Batman has, less common, and even DCAU created villains that are female, because there is a lot of them that I came up with both off the top of my head and just from glancing at a couple articles to remind myself of some of the villains that Batman has had over the years. Now, Batman has villains like Catwoman, obviously, and I'm going to say Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn. The thing with those three is that they often aren't villains anymore. So we could just drop all of them off the list and say, well, maybe he didn't want to use ones that aren't really villains anymore. The problem is that he is still using characters like that in the show. They are still in the show. Like, for example, Harley Quinn is just a straight up villain in the show, went back more to her roots. So it's not like he's averse to using characters that have kind of changed over the years. Like, for example, Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn are now pretty much a couple in most everything, and while they're not exactly the best people alive in terms of morality, they try to do right by people. They've kind of left behind their just straight up villainous ways. If he was saying, well, no, we can't use any characters that have changed over the years, the perception has changed, I would say we could drop these three. The problem is he still does use characters like that in his show. But there are other common characters as well, like, for example, the second Copperhead, you have Cheetah, you have Punchline, which is a big one in, the newer comic books, Ventriloquist, but the version of it that's Peyton Riley. You also have other characters as well that are less popular, or I guess I should say less common, that don't come up quite as much. I don't remember if I mentioned Killer Frost or not on the popular ones, but she's one that I think is also overlooked. In terms of less common, you have characters like Cheshire, who's, usually portrayed as a deadly assassin. You have Sophia Falcone, which is Carmine Falcone's daughter, Lady Shiva, the White Rabbit, and then there's all these characters for the DCAU that became popularized or even sometimes created for the DCAU projects. Like from Batman Beyond, you have Curare, the Dee-Dees, you have Ink. In the old DCAU Batman animated series show, you had Red Claw, Roxy Rocket, the Phantasm, for Mask of the Phantasm. If Timm's point was, well, we don't want to use ones that we already made up for the DCAU, like, that character was made up for the DCAU, if we just reuse them, then we're just rehashing it. I'd say, okay, well then we can knock, 6 of these off the list right there. But the problem is that Harley Quinn was originally created, with Paul Dini, Bruce Timm, and crew basically for the DCAU, for Batman the Animated Series, and Timm still wanted to bring back and reinvent that character here. So he doesn't have any qualms with reusing existing characters. He doesn't have any problem with reusing ones that were originally just for the DCAU. He seems to have no problem with taking characters that exist and putting them in the show. Now, like I said before, I actually don't care that Penguin is a woman, because I'm sure someone will take this and say, oh, Jay's talking about this because he's mad that they made Penguin a woman. I don't know how many times I can stress this. I don't care if Penguin is a woman. I do not care. My care levels of Penguin being a woman are about the same as when Jeffrey Wright played Commissioner Gordon in, of course, the Batman movie. I thought he was great. I thought he was fun. I think there's times where this kind of thing definitely works, where the character on screen is not necessarily the exact way that they originally showed up in the comic books or in animation or whatever. I do also think, a little aside, there's a lot of times where it's just done for the sake of flipping or changing something. To me, that's what it sounds like Bruce Timm was doing, was, well, how do we take all the classic stuff and just flip it around? He even said that. To me, that's not very creative, but it's also not upsetting, where I'm like, no, turn off this woke show, oh, woman, oh, no. Like, I've seen plenty of examples of male Oswald Cobblepot. I've got a billion adaptations of that character. I think they're fun, and I wasn't really that interested in Caped Crusader anyway, either way, where it would affect me regardless. But this idea that Batman doesn't have good villains, so that's why we have to change things, is what is upsetting to me, not the thing that's even being changed. I don't care. The idea that Batman, his rogues gallery is bad. You know, this is so funny to me because Bruce Timm has been involved in a lot of dumb stuff over the years, which I'm probably throwing out my opportunity to ever get a signed autograph from Bruce Timm if I ever do make it big on this platform, but I digress. I do want to talk about these. All the way back to like 2014, 15-ish, I was noticing Bruce Timm kind of step in piles of shit and say dumb things or be involved in very, very dumb situations. Like, for example, when he was on a panel over The Killing Joke, and he was talking about their decision to have Barbara sleep with Batman in this movie, which was kind of ridiculous. And look, I'm actually okay with it in the DCAU. I'm one of the few people who think that for the story that they did with, you know, Return of the Joker and stuff like that, I think that the Batman Barbara thing works. I'm not saying it's the best thing ever. I'm saying it works for that story. But they were shoehorning that with, you know, writer Brian Azzarello into Batman the Killing Joke, the movie. They had one of the worst preludes to a film I've ever seen. It was just tacked on and it dragged the whole film down. And somebody basically called that out and was saying, you know, why is this character using sex in order to be a character, essentially? Because they were talking about it on this panel and someone called that out in the audience. And Brian Azzarello, one of the writers who also worked on Batman Damned, had a meltdown here. This is one of the reasons why I think that his relationship with DC deteriorated over the years, including just stuff around Batman Damned that he said, where he called out the audience member and called them a pussy. He was like, you know, you want to say that again, pussy? And yelled at them. Keep in mind, this is a professional. Like, this is one of the people who writes comic books, who was involved in screenwriting this film, at a official panel calling a fan slash, I don't know if you'd say reporter, basically someone in the audience, a pussy, and just screaming it at them. Like, that's like what a toddler would do, right? We've called that out before and said that the guy's kind of an idiot for that. Far more monetarily successful than I'll ever be, but I bet a lot of people are more successful than me that are also idiotic in their statements. Now, Bruce Timm didn't really do much to really stop this at all. He just kind of like didn't even diffuse the situation. He just kind of jumped in and said, well, it's complicated. I actually like that in the opening story, both Batman and Batgirl make a series of mistakes, and then it kind of escalates because Batman kind of overreacts and then she overreacts to his overreaction. It's a very human thing. And so he didn't really diffuse the situation. He just walked right past it and started talking about something because Bruce Timm doesn't really know how to deal with some of these conversations. That's something that I've noticed for a very long time. Something else I've noticed as well was kind of his defense of the Batman and Harley Quinn movie, which he was one of the key writers on, instead of just animating it, which was kind of a disaster of a film. I don't think it's as awful as some people say, but it's definitely not very good. Now, for those of you who might not know, Paul Dini is one of the creative masterminds behind the original DCAU, and especially behind Batman the Animated Series. His writing was something that elevated the series to new heights, and it really helped combine almost like a dynamic duo type of interaction with him and Bruce Timm's art that elevated that show and propelled the DCAU to where it became beloved. The problem with Bruce Timm is that while I think his art style is pretty irreplaceable in terms of being very unique, sadly, when it comes to a show, if you have style but no substance, or a movie or anything, people can tell. When you have a writer and that writer elevated your thing to completely new heights, it's hard to replace that. So when Paul Dini left and Bruce Timm was kind of left on his own to work on all these projects without Paul Dini, who now, is doing things like the Batman Animated Adventures Continue, comic books, things like that, Paul Dini is still writing well, right? Well, Bruce Timm left the lane that he was most used to and best at. Not saying creatives can't do that, but he left that lane of just art, and Paul Dini mainly stayed in his lane that he was really good at of just writing. When Bruce left that lane and he tried to push more into writing, into producing, and into all these things, the artistic side of these projects stayed very good, especially when he was involved, but it felt like the writing, it's like he was lacking that spark, he was lacking that creative ingenuity without Paul Dini, which is just unfortunate, and that's why I think a lot of this stuff keeps happening, because that dynamic duo element of Paul Dini and Bruce Timm working together, it was something where when you look at Paul Dini writing comic books now, it's not Bruce Timm drawing them. That's why I'm saying that you can put in another artist who does very good work, and if you still have that really great, writing style, or really captivating writing style, people still will really, really enjoy it. But if you lose the writing style and you just have the style of the art, which is something that's happened a lot with Bruce Timm's work over the years, people will notice and people will be frustrated, especially then when that artist is leaving what they're great at to try and pursue different aspects of their career that aren't necessarily working out the best. Now, my wife Jill actually had probably the most scathing review of Bruce Timm's comments that I've seen online so far, but also that kind of encapsulate how a lot of audience members feel about his takes over the years. Maybe he should just go back to being an artist and shut the fuck up. He sounds like an idiot here. And that's something that I think, as brutal as it is, made me laugh hysterically, but it's really true. Like, I have a degree in writing, right? Basically in writing and in teaching English and things like that. That's just kind of the breakdown of it. But there are things that I'm not very good at, whether it be writing styles that I'm not very good at, whether it be an art form that I'm not very good at. If I became a renowned writer right now, I became a renowned writer for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, and then I decided writing's not good enough. I want to draw too. I want to be an artist. And I'm flipping this on its script. I'm doing what he did with Batman the Caped Crusader. I'm just taking it and I'm flipping it here. If I went from renowned writer to artist overnight, I'm going to have some problems, right? Because it's not what I'm used to. It's not what I'm good at. It doesn't mean I could never get good at it, but there are some people who just aren't cut out for certain lines of work, who don't know what they're talking about, but they are amazing at other lines of work. Same way if I went from my job of teaching at a high school and then all of a sudden I decided I'm going to be a plumber. I don't know anything about plumbing. I don't know what I'm doing there. Even if I watched a plumber for a few years, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be good at it. You have to do a lot of learning and have a lot of humility and go back to ground zero in order to start something new. And I don't think Bruce Timm really ever did. I think he just jumped right into it, thought, well, I worked with Paul Dini, I worked with all these other writers, I'm an amazing artist, I can do it. And I think that that's fallen flat over the years. And I think that this description of Batman not having good villains is like the ultimate description of that. It's like, bro, you worked on Batman projects for years of your life. You brought amazing characters to life. You worked on shows that created new villains from the ground up, from scratch. Not even adaptations. You wrote, like, you guys made them up and put them on a show. And you still think Batman doesn't have enough good villains that you have to change the Penguin. Again, I don't care about the change, but like, that's just a weak reasoning. in order to do it. It's just, at that point, you might as well just say, I thought it would be fun. That's all you have to say. You don't have to say it's because Batman has bad villains. You don't have to say anything like that. Just, I thought it would be neat. Cool. That's called creativity. It's not that creative to just take some man and turn them into a woman, but hey, it's at least something with some kind of ingenuity or creative aspect or imagination behind it, more than trying to justify it by putting down decades of mythos and lore to say, no, it wasn't good enough, but then we came along and we made it better. I mean, all these idiots before us, they couldn't write any female villains for Batman. It's like, well, maybe some of this is also from the times that these things were created. Like, you look at statistics, men are more likely to fall into violent crime because of our social structure, because of the idea of providing, because of the idea of economic disparity, because men are taught to measure our egos. We're taught to be successful or you're a bum. We're taught not to share our feelings in a lot of ways. And then we internalize things, and then those externalize as pain. You can see a lot of those things in Batman the Animated Series. A great example of that is Mad Hatter, a character who was basically trying to be sincere, trying to share his feelings over and over again. And then he, I would say, internalized those things and became more and more bitter and then became a villain. It does happen with women too, but it's just more common for men to turn to violent crime. So it stands to reason that there would be more male supervillains or villains for Batman than female. That doesn't mean there aren't a lot of great female ones. And I just don't understand where this comes from. Like, you're looking at it from the lens of the work he did, you're looking at the lens from the work that he should be aware of, or even real life crime statistics. None of this statement makes any sense at all. And it just comes off very conceited to say, well, all this lore before us wasn't good enough. We had to change it to make our own thing because it wasn't good enough, instead of just because we wanted to be creative and different. That's all you had to do. Anyways, let us know what you think in the comments down below. I'm always interested in your thoughts on stuff like this. And usually when stuff like this comes up, people will take one little statement and run with it, like in terms of like, oh, he doesn't like Penguin being a woman for the 50th time. I do not care at all. I just find this to be very dumb reasoning, but I'm interested in your thoughts down there. If you want to support our channel, you can use Fortnite code DJAY123. You can also use that same code on our store, cosmobunny.shop. Now, I've seen a lot of confusion on this shop. I try and clarify pretty much every time, but what we do is we take comic books, manga, and even, of course, magazines that can't be sold because they're damaged, and we actually repurpose bits and pieces of them into a transformative art piece for your home. Sometimes these are coasters, sometimes they're keychains, sometimes they're trays, light switch covers, etc. The list goes on and on. We do not print out pictures to steal IP or steal art. We are taking actual pictures and pages from different things that have been created that are going to landfills really at this point, that were mass produced, and we take some of that, we place it in a coaster, keychain, tray, etc. We turn it into something new and something for your home that I think you'll enjoy. So we hope you like that. Like I said, DJAY123 for 10% off your first purchase, cosmobunny.shop. Hope you have a fantastic day, and as always, everyone, stay shway.